Greetings, everyone. Here are the main points of today's video. Red alert, Russia is collapsing. Ukraine launches missiles at Moscow, cutting off Crimea. Resources are being drained to the capital. So are the remote border regions in the Arctic facing a historic turning point? The seeds of secession and the risk of collapse? How are these existential threats endangering the federal structure? Hell on earth in Sloviansk and Crimea. The campaign to level Sloviansk and Crimea has begun. Russia's main combat focus is shifting, with an unprecedented density of destructive firepower. The risk of the Chasiv Yar fortress being caught in a pincer encirclement and the rise of high-tech warfare in eastern Ukraine. Ukrainian ballistic missiles aimed at Moscow. The astonishing rise of Ukraine's domestic defense industry with advanced missile lines like RAN and Ralfamingo FP1, the official start of long-range firepower warfare, reaching enemy strongholds and vital oil refineries. The nightmare in the Black Sea, 201 Russian warships destroyed, Zhytomyr permanently isolated. Operation Emoloka neutralized 201 warships and indefinitely blockaded the Kerch Strait. The tense standoff is like holding your breath. One side uses drones to block sea supply lines, while the other tries to keep the land corridor between the two G280 Sewell. Welcome to the analysis program of Luan Banqiansu. Before we dive in, please like the video and subscribe to the channel so we can keep going. Thank you, dear audience. Ladies and gentlemen, red alert. Russia is shaken. Ukraine launches missiles at Moscow, cutting off Zhytomyr's role. Amid the intensifying strategic attacks, a big question arises. Can the increasing military pressure trigger a wave of outrage erupting from deep within Russian society? The price to pay for artificial peace in the capital is actually the simmering threat of disaster ready to erupt in distant territories. In these border areas, life was already extremely deprived and now faces the risk of having vital supply chains cut off, especially fuel sources. When maritime journeys along the northern sea route come to a halt at the beginning of November due to freezing ice, air transport becomes the only remaining lifeline. This is also when survival risks reach their peak for the lands located within the Arctic Circle or in the permafrost belt. Ironically, it is these lands that have long endured such deprivation that hold the economic lifeblood of the entire Federation, possessing priceless LNG reserves, gold, platinum, and oil reserves. With destroyed supply routes and strong local political will, these regions have the conditions and motivation to declare independence from the Russian Federation. The sharp disagreements and conflicts of interest between the federal center and the autonomous regions are among the most dangerous triggers that could lead to the cascading collapse of Russia's power structure. Instead of seeking solutions to ease tensions or restore balance, the Kremlin has pushed the conflict to the extreme by continuously draining resources from the provinces to maintain prosperity for Moscow, St. Petersburg, and a few strategic cities. The rest of the country is forced to fend for itself in poverty and isolation. Secession in remote areas is more likely since the central government's military intervention is greatly limited by the terrain. While in Ukraine, traveling from Donbass to Uzhhorod by road or rail is very convenient, deploying forces from Moscow or St. Petersburg to a frozen industrial center like Durinsk in winter is an extremely challenging logistics problem. With the transportation system completely disconnected, except for air routes, deploying Russian National Guard troops to quell hotspots in the Arctic region not only exhausts the already depleted Air Force resources due to war, but also tests the endurance limits of security forces in harsh weather conditions. The central government is taking a risky gamble with the real risk of collapse, or being forced to accept tearing down and rebuilding both the legal and practical political agreements with localities. This is the strategic weak point that Ukraine can exploit to put maximum pressure on the enemy's war command apparatus. Russia is focusing its efforts on redirecting its offensive. The operation to destroy Sloviansk and Crimea has started. On the eastern Ukraine battlefield, a new fierce and tragic chapter is unfolding as Russian forces gradually shift their operational focus to the strategic urban cluster of Sloviansk and Crimea. Reports from the Diktat organization say the opposing side is urgently preparing for a major campaign by brutally destroying and turning residential areas into battlefields before infantry moves in. Now, high-tech warfare is becoming a real nightmare. Although Ukrainian defense forces are still trying to inflict heavy losses on Russian infantry, The pressure from the density of Air Force firepower and unmanned aerial vehicles has turned the two cities of Slavyansk and Karmato into living hells. Day and night, the sky here is constantly shaken by barrages of guided KA-B bombs and multiple launch rocket salvos. Shahed kamikaze drones and countless FPV drones fly out, sweeping through every street to hunt down each moving target. All civilian activities have almost completely come to a halt as Russian firepower now reaches as far as 40 kilometers behind the defensive lines. This city is now completely isolated from the outside world and has become a dead zone where any movement not serving military purposes comes at the cost of one's life. At the same time, Russian forces are increasing suffocating pressure on the city of Kostyantayevka through continuous infantry assaults to reinforce key positions within the city. The main current strategic threat centers on the land between Ulanivka and Novotmachivka. If Novotmachivka falls, all Ukrainian defensive forces holding out at the Chasiv Yar fortress will face disaster, being surrounded and cut off from retreat. Russian drone squadrons' total air superiority has long severely compromised supply and support routes in this area. While Russian infantry persistently gnaws away at every corner of Kostyantayevka, heavy artillery fire and remotely guided anti-tank missiles continue to rain down, destroying not only the city center, but also turning surrounding areas like Oleshevo and Duhivka into chaotic piles of rubble. Not stopping there, the front stretching from Yampo to Minkiivka is also witnessing extremely tense developments as the enemy relentlessly increases pressure, preparing for large-scale raids that observers predict will be the next main direction of attack after Kostyantayevka falls. The Russian army is actively using artillery to clear minefields, suppress potential advance routes, and continuously deploy reconnaissance teams to probe for weaknesses in Ukraine's defensive lines. These tactical weaknesses have begun to appear in the Ozen and Kivaluka areas, raising the risk of a breach in the security corridor. Although Ukrainian forces are making every effort to stop the enemy's deep advance, Russia's next priority targets, such as Mykolaiivka and Olesandivka, are facing serious threats as deadly drones continue to hunt down the remaining supply routes. Ukrainian missiles strike Moscow, driving the war further into Russia. The war is entering a turning point, with the battlefield no longer limited to the fiery front lines in Donbass or southern Ukraine, but now spreading deep into the very heart of the enemy's power. Mr. Denis Vyolimins made a shocking statement. The capital, Moscow, will now face direct attacks from ballistic missiles developed and produced by Ukraine itself. After completing the phases of structural load testing, payload capacity, and engine performance, test flights will be quickly conducted before officially deploying this line of strategic weapons in actual combat. Although the Ukrainian military will be the one to decide the final combat coordinates, Mr. Denis Vyolimins believes that targets with high symbolic and strategic value in the heart of the Russian capital will definitely be at the top of the list for the first strikes. The appearance of this domestically produced ballistic missile line, expected to achieve a range exceeding 800 to 850 kilometers and complete mass production by mid-2026, is being considered a strong response to the West's caution. When compared to Russia's renowned Iskander ballistic missile line, Ukraine's design demonstrates impressive military technical advantages: longer range, larger warhead payload, significantly lower production costs, and especially a much faster approach speed to the target. The delays in piecemeal aid packages from the US and Europe have inadvertently created space for Russia to adapt to the supplied weapons, forcing Ukraine's defense industry to rely on itself to achieve breakthroughs. The reality on the battlefield proves that Ukraine's private defense companies are maturing at an astonishing rate. A typical example is 5Point, a tech startup founded right after the conflict broke out in 2022, which has now become the backbone of Ukraine's long-range strike operations. CEO Ivana Tezsek revealed an astonishing fact. Almost all of the strategic strikes deep inside Russian territory in recent months have involved products made by 5Point, with an average frequency of 5 to 15 attacks per day. Each month, this company rolls out about 100 Flamingo long-range cruise missiles, along with hundreds of fixed-wing drones of the FP-1 and FP-2 series. The Flamingo missile series, with warheads weighing up to 1,150 kilograms capable of penetrating reinforced concrete structures, has proven its combat capability by destroying a Russian military component factory in Cheboksary, more than 600 miles from the border. Thanks to its complex flight path designed to evade enemy air defenses, the actual range of the Flamingo reaches up to 1,800 kilometers, setting one of the records for long-range cruise missile operations in history. Notably, each Flamingo costs less than 600,000 USD, which is much lower than the 3.5 million USD price tag of the Tomahawk series produced by the US. In addition to heavy missiles, cheap drone models like FP1 with an operational range exceeding 1,000 miles and a cost ranging from only 55,000 to 75,000 USD are playing the role of extremely effective expendable weapons. They focus on attacking Russia's domestic oil refineries, which are often poorly protected, indirectly cutting up to 20% of the enemy's fuel production capacity and causing long lines and shortages at gas stations across Russia. Firepoint's production scale has now expanded to 83 factories spread across Ukraine, along with one facility in Denmark. The workforce has grown to 6,000 people, nearly double compared to the end of last year. Looking back at the early workshops equipped with materials like plywood, plastic, and carbon fiber, former Lieutenant General Ben Hodges, ex-commander of U.S. Army Europe, said this is the reward for Ukraine's years of self-reliance. These weapons not only penetrate dense air defense fire to reach deep into Russian territory with high precision, but also carry enough destructive power to create real changes on the battlefield. This resurgence is gradually closing the gap in long-range strike capabilities between the two sides in a fierce arms production race. According to estimates from the Ukrainian side, the Russian military currently maintains a monthly production capacity of about 70 K-101 air-launched cruise missiles, 25 Kalibr missiles launched from warships, and about 60 ballistic and Iskander missiles. Ukraine's ability to independently mass-produce various types of ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and long-range drones is not only a solution to the shortage of aid, but also marks a shift in the dynamics of the war. This firepower contest has officially become a strategic contest on equal footing, directly threatening the economic potential and military infrastructure deep inside Russia. Black Sea nightmare. 201 Russian warships destroyed, leaving the Russian Navy permanently isolated. An unprecedented war of attrition is quietly shaking the economic and military lifelines of the Russian Federation. In just 3 short weeks, Ukraine's unmanned systems forces, under the command of Commander Robert Brobdy, unleashed devastating firepower on 201 warships and transport vessels belonging to Russia's Shadow Fleet. The secret operation Green Ghost Emolaka, launched in early July, has made the shallow Azov Sea and Black Sea Strip a deadly trap. Battlefield statistics recorded 129 ships hit in the Azov Sea and 72 other ships bombarded in the Black Sea, not to mention a series of targets destroyed by the Ukrainian Security Agency and other defense forces. Robert Brobdy's statement exposes a harsh reality. Russia's maritime transport capability here has been almost completely destroyed. The ships that once proudly sailed the waves are now just scrap metal hulks or powerless barges. With the Kerch Strait effectively blockaded indefinitely, the strategic choke point connecting the two vital seas has been tightly sealed, threatening and freezing the supply route to the Crimean Peninsula. The essence of Operation Emolaka, named after jellyfish products, is a cunning blow to the Shadow Fleet at sea, which is the key for Russia to bypass Western sanctions and maintain the flow of oil, instead of wasting firepower on massive oil tankers. Ukraine's tactic focuses on eliminating small oil tankers and support vessels, key links responsible for collecting crude oil, transferring it to larger ships, and transporting fuel to sustain the Crimean Peninsula. Because filling a supertanker for export requires 12 to 15 trips by smaller shuttle vessels. Therefore, destroying these small links means freezing the entire supply chain. By attacking and heavily damaging instead of completely sinking them, Ukrainian drone squadrons have turned many Russian ships into ghostly hulks, drifting aimlessly on the water. Damaged steel masses no longer capable of carrying cargo. As Robert Brobdy once emphasized, Russia's Shadow Fleet is withering away day by day, and the ultimate goal is to completely wipe out this transport network. The bombardment at sea is only one half of the strategic pincer aimed at 2 vital factors for the Kremlin: oil revenue and the ability to resupply Crimea. Entering 2026, while Western financial sanctions still have loopholes, Ukraine has proactively struck directly at oil revenues. The main financial source for the war machine is being targeted by simultaneously attacking both domestic oil refineries and the oil tanker fleet at sea. The blockade of the strait acts like a sharp fence cutting through the enemy's key supply lines. When this strait falls under the absolute control of Ukrainian drones, both the flow of oil exports through the Sea of Azov and the transportation of fuel to Crimea are placed under Kiev's fire control. In response to the fierce maritime blockade, the Russian military has focused on strengthening the land corridor through occupied southern Ukraine to secure Crimea's lifeline. The intense tug-of-war between one side using drones to blockade the sea routes and the other side striving to maintain the land corridor paints a grim picture of warfare, where every supply route becomes a boundary between life and death. So, in your opinion, despite Ukraine's impressive victories, why hasn't Russia withdrawn its troops yet?